I'm going to edit a few photos today of some chimps. I don't really know what I'm going to do with them at the moment. I'm just going to edit them and see where I end up. I thought I'd record it and maybe show how I do it and show you a few tips maybe. So I'll stop talking and we'll just see what happens. So this is the image I'm going to edit, and what I want to do is I just want to make a kind of portrait of just of his face. So the first thing I'm going to do in Lightroom is I'm going to use the crop tool at the top, and I want to make a square crop. So I'm just going to kind of get roughly where I want by altering that, and I just really want his face and shoulders, and that'll do for now. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to decrease the greens a little bit, something like that, and then I'm going to go straight into Photoshop. So if I right click on it and edit in Photoshop, that will open in Photoshop. First thing I'm going to do is duplicate the layer, and then I'm going to make a mask of the monkey's face. So if I go up to the top here and go to the object selection tool and just draw a square around the monkey. So once I've made a mask of the monkey's face, I'm going to right click, make sure I'm on the same tool. I'm going to right click and layer via cut, and then I'm going to go back to the background layer, and you'll see here that it's kind of cut the monkey out, put it onto layer 1 and just left me the background in the background copy. With the background copy selected, I'm going to go to filter, blur and Gaussian blur, and I'm just going to increase the radius until the background blurs, something like that, and that'll do it. Click OK. Now you might see sometimes you get bits around the mask that hasn't been blurred properly. So what I'll do then is I'll go to the clone stamp tool, lower the opacity to around 50, something like that, keep it on a low opacity, and then use the Alt button, the ALT button, Alt, and click to the left of where I want to paint over. So you see here this bit round here is a bit jaggedy, so if I click just to the left of it, it samples that bit, and then I can paint round the bits that hasn't quite picked up and blurred how I wanted it to. You see more down by the hands here. The reason I click left, slightly to the left of where I'm painting, is because it will sample only that part of the paint. If I clicked up there and painted, it would copy this colour up here, so I want to keep it as close to the mask as possible. There's a little tiny bit at the top, but again it doesn't matter too much for, I think, where I'm going to edit, how I'm going to edit this, because I'm going to blur that out. Okay, so once that's done, I'm going to start doing the shading and see really where it takes me. Now the first thing is the blue at the bottom. I don't like this blue. I want it all kind of like a uniform colour, so I'll get rid of that as well. Something like that. I'll keep that in case I want to come back to it, but what I'll do now is I'll go up to File and Save, and that will save that back into Lightroom. So once it's back in Lightroom, this is where I start to try and burn it down and make it pop a little bit more. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to increase the clarity a little bit. And decrease the blues, which something like that. And then I'm going to open it back up in Photoshop, duplicate the layer, go up to image and go to image tone, gives it a little bit more of a pop. Then I'm going to use the dodge and burn tool, but I'm going to right click and use the dodge brush. Make sure the brush is the same size as the monkey's eyes, and then I'm just going to click a couple of times on the eyes just to bring the eyes out a little bit. Then I'm going to use the sharpen brush and just sharpen just around the eyes, nose and mouth and the ear. And then I'm going to duplicate the layer. And you could leave it at that because it's still quite a nice shot, but I might try and black the background and just see if I can blend it in a little bit more. So I will save that, and that will open that back up into Lightroom when I click on Lightroom. And then let's just try increasing the contrast, adding a heavy vignette. Let's decrease the blues a little bit more because I can still see quite a bit of blue. That's better. I could leave it there, I suppose. Again, I mean, it's come from that to that. What else would I want to do? Try bringing the shadows up a little bit. It just brings out a little bit more detail in the darks. Maybe touch up the whites. And lower the highlights. I'm going to save that because I'm quite happy with how that looks. But then I'm going to push it even more. So if I use the masking tool here and create a radial gradient around the monkey's face, so the main circle is around the face, I'm going to invert that and then bring down the shadows and the colour just a little bit, so the exposure. And then I'm going to bring down the greens. I think it's a bit too green. What I might do is then I might adjust the temperature to go a bit more yellow, which will make it a bit warmer. Back onto the 3 lines, back to the main editing, and it looks a bit too crisp and a bit too sharp for me now. So I'm going to bring down the texture and just touch the clarity a little bit. I don't like this bit here. I think it's a bit distracting. I know it's the light off there, but I think it's really distracting. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm just going to try and darken this area here just to see what it looks like. So again, I'll use the masking tool, create a new mask, and I'll create a radial gradient, and I'll just make it around here. I'll try just lowering the exposure just to see what it looks like. Lower it a little bit and then lower the highlights. I think it's still just doesn't look right. It may just be the way the photo was taken. So this is before, this is after. With that on, I'm going to click on the mask and I'm going to subtract with brush. I'm just going to paint over the monkey's chin where I've included that in the mask. So that'll bring that back. And I think that's where I'm going to finish off. What was the original? It was taken at ISO 1000. So I'm going to right click on that, editing, and editing topaz denoise. Once that opens up, I'm going to use the low light setting and decrease the enhanced sharpness, and I click apply. I think that's where I'm going to leave it. I don't want to go fully black on it. Yeah, I think that will do it for that photo. Now what I always do is I just pop through the presets just to see if there's any kind of colour that I like. Now instantly I've clicked on that and I like that. It's just give it a bit more warm, it's just warm the shadows. Now you can do that by going down to the split toning, click on the shadows here and just moving that up. So if I click on the warm contrast again, you can see it's had the same kind of effect but not as strong. If I actually click on the warm contrast and lower the amount, I can get it to where roughly I want it, but it seems to give it like a bit of a green, to me a bit of a, too much of a green tint and a blue tint, which I'm not happy with. Let's just try turning that down. Yeah, I like that. That's a bit different. What I want to do now is I'm going to get into Photoshop and I'm just going to try and get rid of some of these white lines here around the edges. I don't like them. So if I go back to Photoshop, close that one down, and then editing Photoshop again, create a new layer by duplicating the layer. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and all these white lines around here and the edges I really don't like, so I'm going to show you how to get rid of them. So if you zoom in just a little bit and then use the clone tool, clone stamp tool, go to the top and click on darken, decrease the size of the brush, and then click on the colour you want to take the colour from, click on the part, and so there's a white line there and I want to get rid of it, so I'm going to click on the top and then I'm just going to paint over, bring the opacity up, just going to paint over the white line. Again, do the same around the edges here. Maybe bring the opacity down to about 70%. May need to go over it a couple of times. So I'm just going to go see a bit here that hasn't been picked up with the mask, so I'll go back over that in a minute. Also, by doing this, it also takes away the sharpness of the edges. I'm going to stay on the clone tool, change it back to normal and bring the opacity down to something really low, around 30. Increase the size of the brush, and there's bits here that just need blending in a little bit more that wasn't picked up on the mask. If you want to be really precise, if you zoom in really to the extreme, you'll see like a faint line where it hasn't got rid of the bright part I went over when I darkened it. So again, I can use the clone tool and then just clone over that dark line. That will make your images a lot sharper as well. To be honest, I used to do this a lot, go right round the sides, but unless it's really standing out, I don't bother so much anymore. I still think it's a bit too sharp now. I think it needs softening, and you can see here between the hairs on his chin it's a bit lighter, so I'm just going to use the clone brush again, increase the size, put it onto darken, and then just paint on some of the brighter parts. And that's about it, I think, with this one. I think that's all I'm going to do. One thing I don't kind of like is this bit here. It kind of looks a bit too sharp, so I'm going to use the smudge tool, not the smudge tool, the blur tool, and just try and blur that in a little bit more so it doesn't look too much like a shape. I could always use the clone brush again and set it to normal and a really low opacity, and just click over the colour and it kind of blends it in a little bit more. Sometimes you can go too much, but just have a play with it little bit by bit. I think that's okay. So I'll save that. Back into Lightroom. Now it's just a little bit too sharp for me, so what I want to do is I'm going to lower the texture. And maybe just up the saturation, and that's it. I'm happy with that. How that kind of looks. It's a little bit different, so that's that one.